Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Chris Feeney's with me. Chris was just letting us know that he had to get some dental stuff for his family taken care of. Kind of urgent call last night. Chris, when you have a family, it never ends, right?
I know you think you're getting close to the finish line, and then just stuff happens to appear out of nowhere. So, joys of parenting, right? I want to go watch that Steve Martin film called Parenthood again, just so I could laugh my tears away.
If you just had a UMS server and you could just push down exactly what you want to happen, you reset.
That would be fantastic. Somebody needs to invent that thing. Son, plug yourself into the ICG. Let's take care of this right now.
Well, we also have Seb with us. Seb is the newest member of the LinkedIn community. Seb, welcome to LinkedIn.
Yeah. Welcome, Seb. You have no idea what you just signed up for.
Yeah, that's apparently the same thing that I have since yesterday evening. But I'm late on the party, like I said, but I'm there. I mean, I promised it a long time ago, and now it's time. Not sure how I feel about that, but it's an exciting feeling.
It's a great professional repository to find people and reach out to people. Unfortunately, that means people can find you and reach out to you. I must get like 10 messages a day from somebody random that wants to be my my life coach or my exercise coach, my health coach, or my business coach. I probably need a coach for all those things, but if I did, I would just sit around and get coached all the time.
That's right. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. Andy's ready to play.
I'm playing all right.
He's playing all right. There is something to be said about sharpening the saw, pulling off, and just kind of getting things. And then I think there's a great story. I can't remember if it's real or just sort of one of these things where Abraham Lincoln was asked, if you got to cut a tree down, how much time? He said, well, I spent 8 hours sharpening my saw and 1 hour cutting a tree.
Right.
Like, there it is. Anyway.
There's certainly.
Are we ready to cut some trees right now? Have we?
No, actually, this is the sharpening the saw section. That's what we're doing.
Very good. That's right. You're sharpening the saw for all you listeners out there. Seb, what do you got teed up for us today?
What I would suggest is to take over the Active Directory topic for today, just because there is some misunderstanding that I'm seeing on the daily basis on the Agile community regarding domain join, logging into Active Directory, using Active Directory through ICG, and how the pass-through process itself is working, and which limitations we have, and which possibilities and opportunities we have if you use the Active Directory instead going directly into the desktop.
So, Seb,
that was the topic I would suggest for today.
Let me set that up with some, real world consulting experience I've had. My first interaction and most people's first interaction with an IGEL solution, let's say in the Citrix or VMware world, is kind of where you take this really powerful Linux operating system and you manage it down to basically a zero client. Now, zero client has a long history. We may have talked about in the podcast before, but there's thin clients and then there's zero clients. Zero clients pretty much mitigate all functionality and just take it straight into whatever the EUC solution of choice is. Zero client was a gimmick from day one where it just took great existing stuff, skinnied it down a little further, and then limited it to going into one solution or another, period. You can only do one or the other. But the experience for the user was simply they turn it on. It comes right up to, let's say, the Citrix Workspace app. That's all you can log into. You log into that. You hit your Citrix environment. You get out of that or disconnect from it. It logs you back out. Very minimal experience. What we found with customers who needed more advanced functionality, where they truly needed a thin operating system, but not a zero operating system, is where they need to actually log into the thin client first, the thin client operating system. And then they need to go from there wherever they go. It could be web apps, could be EUC of flavor X or flavor Y. And we found that we really needed people to log in a more enterprise way. And that's where something like Active Directory, which is Kerberos-based system from back in the day, from Microsoft, still very, very, very relevant. It's like the phone book, right? It knows what your device operating system is, knows who you are, knows what your password for both is, and how you should be coming into the system, and even does things to proactively like change the machine account password. I think what we're going to talk about here, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're going to help us understand how that works and how we bring a system into an Active Directory world as a machine account.
Yeah, I would go maybe not that far because the machine account in that case wouldn't match directly. We are really focusing in how to log in into the Active Directory by using username and password coming from your Active Directory. So the goal of this Active Directory part of our configuration is obviously, first of all, to give a little bit more security. Since we released 11.06 version, I'm just jumping to that because it was one main argument of the Active Directory topic before 11.06, is that as soon as you boot up an IGEL device, it will boot directly into the desktop. So even if the IGEL OS is safe and we have a lot of security layers, you are still some malicious people on the desktop, and you could start something which is already there. So from our point,
and you're assuming, which is more often than not, or almost 100% accurate, that device is now at a desktop and has access to maybe some basic apps, maybe a browser app, maybe a command line app, CLI, and it's plugged into or wirelessly connected to that important resource of the companies, which is the network, right? We don't want to just let them jump right on the network like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And besides that, also sorry, go for it.
No, I just want to say, so I think you were referring to it earlier, Seb. You are not joining IGEL OS to the Active Directory domain. It doesn't become a machine object like you would a normal Windows machine. So for those Windows admins out there, Active Directory admins that are kind of used to that type of thing, that's not what's happening here. If you've ever, I'm going to bring up our competition, unfortunately, because this is the most equivalent thing I can think of, right? But if you've ever seen Delphin OS, you can turn on a login screen, but you're not joining that to the domain. You're just pointing it at some authentication source, and that's what's happening with IGEL. I mean, you're welcome to create a domain object out there. You can do that, but it's not going to be relevant because you're not using any of that to manage the IGEL device. It's still going to be through UMS. Maybe that's pretty well known, but I suspect there may be some confusion out there, so I bring it up. And then, of course, there's, and while we're talking here, Andy's browsing the difference between a user versus a computer object. So
I do want to ask the question, is it possible to associate the machine with Active Directory, or it's always just going to be the user in IGEL's use cases?
For the moment, it's only the user. We have some requests, or we had some requests coming from the market to join some Azure Active Directories, etc. And we have also some enterprise level customers who wanted to have that feature. But I would say in most cases, as soon as we showed how the UMS is working, how the profiles are working, the domain join wasn't required anymore. So we have this, it's not covered there because it's something that we have not enabled by default, but we have this realm D, which is the ability to join a computer to the Active Directory, even if it's a Linux device, which would work in specific cases, but it's not part of what we cover today. So we might have something like that in the future, but for the moment, it's really just logging into the Active Directory, like Chris mentioned.
User
so
account.
The
user logging into Active Directory. Got it.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that's where as soon as the device boots up, you are already on the desktop, and you might have also maybe access to the background logo, which is there. You might have some session name, which might give you a first information about the company you're looking at. So then you can go a little bit deeper in some attacks. That's something that we want to avoid by using a pre-login window. I'm just mentioning 11.06 because there we have an even better way to solve that, which wasn't there on 11.05, which is the pre-boot authentication. Might be topic of an upcoming Tech Tip Tuesday video, but for the moment, just saying as soon as the device boots up, you get the login mask, and you cannot bypass that login mask, so you have to enter a valid credential.
Seb, I'm going to say might be to must have that as a Tech Tip Tuesday. Just put it on the list.
Right. Yeah.
Happy to join you on that because I need to know.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. So yeah.
Let's talk. I mean, so the blog we're reviewing is actually a vlog, right? It's a video blog that Seb did, and the name of it is "How to Log In Using Active Directory on IGEL OS Video." And this is from September 16th. But what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk through what's in the video. I think we've pretty much covered the introduction piece. Seb, you want to talk through what you do in the video to create an Active Directory login profile?
Oh, yes, for sure. Like more or less on every tutorial, I'm trying to avoid some misunderstandings, because if we speak about Active Directory, a lot of our users, and I guess it's something which is absolutely human, are thinking about some specific configuration that we already have in our IGEL UMS. So just before even starting the topic, logging into the Active Directory login in a standard way, not speaking about shared workspace, means that it had nothing to do with the Active Directory LDAP feature that you have under UMS administration Active Directory LDAP. It's not mandatory to have that configured to log in from the endpoint into the Active Directory. Just wanted to mention that because that is a little bit misleading, even from our side, when it comes to the KB article. So that's just a set that I want.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can have the UMS set up to point to Active Directory. An extra benefit is if you then want to set up UMS admins to use your domain account rather than the local ones you set up. That's not necessary for this, but we do need to be able to talk to domain controllers, I should say, in order to set up either the shared workplace feature or just a regular Active Directory login. So,
hey guys, so is the video here and the concept that we're going over here, is this for machines that are on the network, the LAN or the WAN, or are these machines coming in remotely through ICG?
In that case, really for LAN. We have another piece of software which is called SWP, so Shared Workplace, which covers logging into Active Directory through ICG without the need to having a VPN started. But that's really, let's say, a specific topic for its own, because Shared Workplace is, it's not the same as just logging into the Active Directory. There you have the ability to assign profiles to an Active Directory user, which makes it even more, let's say, user-friendly when it comes to user-based configurations. But it isn't mandatory to use the shared workplace feature for just logging into the Active Directory.
Is the shared workplace feature the only way to come in through the outside?
Yeah.
If you're going to use AD login and you're off the network going through ICG, then you would need shared workplace in order to do that. Because obviously, if you don't have that set up, you're off the network, there's your device is talking to the domain controller. You have to have the ICG to be able to do that. So that's where the shared workplace feature comes into play.
And just so people aren't confused, we can still, from off the network, talk to the Citrix front door, the VMware front door, the Microsoft front door. But if we want to authenticate against Active Directory, we've got to use shared workplace through the ICG.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. I know I have tested this, where I'd use shared workplace. I log in off network, and then I'm able to use Kerberos to pass through credentials into like a Citrix session. It's been a while since I've tested that, but I'm pretty sure that workflow, right? Authenticate first, and then use those credentials to get into a domain base that's using the pass-through. I know you've got that lift coming up here on this vlog.
All right, so hopefully I haven't confused people, but today we're talking about creating an Active Directory profile in UMS that allows for Active Directory login of the user that can then be passed along to other things like the Citrix Workspace app.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Sorry.
So in the first place, even first is the local login, which makes the device a little bit more secure because you're not arriving directly into the desktop. But then the next step is obviously, yes, to path that information into a session like Citrix. Exactly. So what we do on a POV or on a customer side, as soon as it comes to Active Directory, it's the easiest way to go into a new profile and check that a specific configuration, which is under security Active Directory, that you have a domain name set there. And that's something which is more or less mandatory if it's not propagated on the network, having an address or address list of domain controllers where the endpoint can speak to. One thing I just want to mention, because even if it sounds simple, it's one of the most common causes of issues when it comes to Active Directory logins. Please always check that the time and date on the domain controller, on the UMS server, even if it's not mandatory, and on the endpoint are more or less in sync, so that you don't have, let's say, 15 minutes or 1 hour of delay between all of them, because that can cause issues when it comes to this ticketing of the Kerberos information. So that's just a mandatory thing.
So Seb, by default, it's 5 minutes on Kerberos, unless you've changed it. So it needs to be within 5 minutes, and time zone doesn't really matter as long as it aligns once you adjust for the time zone.
Yeah, exactly. Time zone is not relevant, but you have to stay in sync. Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that when I came to IGEL, I dealt with the world of smart cards, and this was always a key piece. Using NTP, setting up if you're going to do an AD login with that card, and then pass through, but you had to make sure that was correctly. Now the other piece that came up was, should you point to a domain controller, a Windows domain controller as your time source? I learned years ago, don't do that. Point at actual NTP source. I know other people have done it before and it might work, but I've seen where that can get haywire down the road. So I've always been coaching them point at an actual NTP source, whether that's a public NTP or a time server that you set up on your network or something. Would you concur?
100%. Can even be complicated if you use the LCG, because if the endpoint is not having a correct date, especially dates, the certificate validation process will not be successful. And even if the connection and everything is set up properly, the device will not register. So, I mean, just common sense when it comes to certificate checks, smart cards definitely too, that you need something like that. But I just want to mention it because even if it's mentioned 1,000 times, we still have the specific use cases where it wasn't set up, especially on the endpoint side, because it's a dump thin client or a dump endpoint. In that case, definitely NTP, time and date matters. And that's something which is, let's say, equally important than having a proper DNS working, because as soon as we get into the Active Directory and also into the domain name resolving, a proper set NTP, DNS is mandatory. Because even if we set everything in our profiles, if the DNS is not working like expected, or if you're not using the right suffix DNS server, which are used for resolving the domain itself, we will fail, and then it's getting a little bit difficult to get the result sorted out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when you're setting this up, you could certainly punch in an IP address, but it's an Active Directory environment. Use DNS. If you don't have DNS set up right, at some point it's going to probably come back and get you. That could tie into certificates and the friendly names and all that other stuff. Just, make sure your DNS is accurately set up. Make sure IGEL is, we can resolve that type of thing. But certainly UMS, because UMS is going to have some piece of that where they're talking to the domain controllers. But carry on, Seb. Carry on.
Well, comment for you guys on that. Is it not true that, we can use DNS, but we should probably point to a load balancer that front ends a set of DNS servers?
You can. I mean, if you're speaking about DNS front robbing request, that's something that we usually do, yes.
Mm-hmm. That would
Especially
work.
when it comes to IGEL server, like an example.
Yeah, I've seen that before where it's like LDAP S dot domain dot whatever, and that resolves to, I don't know, 3 or 4 different domain controllers or something.
Yeah, that's definitely how we recommend doing it. And unless you just really want to keep it simple, and load balancing is something that your organization doesn't have or doesn't have knowledge of how to manage. Okay. Regarding the video, where are we at in terms of the breakdown you have here in the blog on the video?
Let me check. So from the timeline, we are at 3:40, so 3 minutes 40, create Active Directory login profile.
Okay.
I'm doing that from memory, so I don't have the exact timeline in front of me, but just wanting to share that is a preparation for having the device be able to talk to the Active Directory. Now we have to set up also the configuration for the Light DM greeter, which is the login mask that we are using on our endpoint for pathing through any kind of login information to something else. And in our case, we want to pair that to the Active Directory. So we have under security logon a specific submenu, which is called Active Directory /Kerberos, if I remember right, where you have also to say to the endpoint, hey, as soon as you boot up, don't start into the desktop, but start into the Active Directory login mask. And that's just a small checkbox that you need to remember, and it just log into AD domain, if I remember right. All the other stuff that you have there is fine-tuning. So you can say that you don't want to keep the last username. If you want to use a smart card, you can do that too. But mainly, that's enough for logging into the Active Directory. So we might cover an advanced course on Active Directory logon in the near future, but in that case, it should be enough. So just assign that profile to the endpoint, and the endpoint will restart the graphical user interface. And you should see, I don't know what the English term for that color is, but I would say some green-blue color with a logo of a user and a username and password field. And as soon as you have that, you can usually enter your Active Directory login details, hit enter, and you should see the desktop. Before having people in the podcast discussions asking, yes, we can customize a lot of stuff from this window, because I know that, yeah, some people would like to have it like on Windows, some would like to have their company logo. So most of the components that you see in that login mask, yes, are configurable. Not everything from the profile GUI, but from the registry, or by using some custom command that you can easily find on the IGELcommunity.com in our Slack community, or also asking your IGEL SEs or support. But that's an advanced topic. But from the pure login mechanism, that's enough, and then you're on the desktop. Basically, what you do then is starting a session. But in a typical, or let's say in a perfect world, you don't want to enter again your Active Directory login informations. You want to pass through what you entered in the login dialog into that client. So that's what we call the session pass-through feature, which is not limited to Citrix, which you can use also for ADP, which you can use also for VMware Horizon. But just in case, because the question came up quite often, from a standard point of view, browsers are not supported at the moment. So if you have, let's say, your storefront or Netscaler in a web browser session in a standard way, you will not be able to pass through the Active Directory login information to the web browser session. So there you have to use the normal store browse feature that we have in our Citrix storefront configuration. On the configuration itself, it's pretty easy. You don't have to think about too much different configuration mechanism there. You have, depending from the session you are looking at. In my case, I will just cover the Citrix session. You have your Citrix session, then you have Citrix storefront, then you have your session. And under that session, you should find a login or logon window. And there, the storefront login, if I remember right, you have just one checkbox, which is important. It's use pass-through authentication. Hit that one. Don't enter something else. Don't change auto login or whatever. Just use pass-through authentication. Save your profile, assign it, and then, if everything works fine, the device should log in directly into your Citrix session. Did I miss something, Chris? Or
I'm just going through the setup here that Andy's kind of scrolling through on the screen.
So guys, so you're doing the Active Directory authentication, and then you're going into your EUC app of choice at this point, Citrix, and saying allow the AD authentication to flow through you into whatever the backend system is. Now, Seb, I'm assuming, and I'm looking through the video now, did you create the AD profile and then go test it and then back out and then go try the, okay, so you did it in steps.
Yeah. Exactly. So you have I guess it was at minute 8, something like that, we have the pass-through configuration itself. And there I'm going through the profile that I'm usually deploying to customers. That means Citrix. I guess I've covered ADP and VMware Horizon. I'm not sure if I covered some other sessions, but I guess I mentioned them. And yes, exactly. So as soon as I created that profile, I assigned it to my endpoint, I re-logged into my Active Directory, and then had my session automatically starting without the need on entering anything else than the standard process of starting the session in an auto start or double click on the desktop.
And I'm going to give you kudos here. I love. I'm kind of scrolling through the video now, and you actually have, just like it is in the blog here, you have the titles broken out as you just scroll through. I was sitting there glancing at the screen trying to figure out where you're at. You actually have it so where it shows up in the slider. That's really awesome.
Nicely done there, Seb. You're getting your YouTube skills really. I mean, I'm very impressed. I mean, it's sit under your tutelage. This is great.
Thank you.
All right, so let's use the slider. So so you test your Active Directory connection just like you have in the blog here. You configure the session pass through, and then anything else to talk about in terms of passing it through and getting the results?
One extreme important information when it comes to Citrix. You might have a situation where you configured everything like in the tutorial, and you will still fail. And when I say fail, I mean that the Citrix session is starting. You might have something like an authentication happening, but no apps are listed on the desktop. No session is able to be opened. One small thing to consider. I'm not a Citrix expert at all, so I will just give you what I have found in my lab. The trusted domain information that you have in your Citrix storefront and Citrix configuration have to match one-on-one the configuration of the domain name that you entered in the IGEL profile. Means if you have your domain called home demo, like it's in my case, and I'm logging into the endpoint with homedemo.net, which is the full qualified domain name in my case, it will fail. So I have to be exactly the same like in my lab, so like in my trusted domain list from the Citrix configuration. It's not a big deal because it's usually function, but if you see something like that, it's highly that it's related to the trusted domain configuration, which is not happening.
And Seb, is that assuming you're using NetBIOS names, not the user principal names?
Yes, exactly.
So if you just use your user principal names, which we all agreed to do like 20 years ago, it'll just pass through that and it'll see it and understand what it is. But in most cases, people still use NetBIOS names, short names for their usernames, right?
Exactly. So that's just a small hint from my side, because I know that I lost a little bit of my hairs on some POVs at the beginning, and I wasn't even sure where to look at. And yeah, I just made a screenshot of my lab, so I think that I'm seeing something like that on the Azure community. I'm posting that configuration window where I'm referring to, and in 99% of the cases, as soon as this configuration is corrected, the complete path through certification is working like expected.
I'm sorry, Seb, you lost a little bit of your what?
Sorry?
You lost a little bit of your what in your first POVs?
We allow this to be flagged by the FCC. Be careful.
When I post these things, I always have to check a box whether it's explicit or not, and I never have had to check that box. And now because of Seb, because he's on LinkedIn.
So sorry for that.
He's well, we have a lot of fun here. We just got to be careful, boys and girls.
No.
I was going to ask you.
That one doesn't count. I'm sure that one.
I mean, there's worse things that have been on TV, but I was going to ask you, do you touch on the domain realm mapping?
Not in the tutorial, to be honest.
Yeah, it's honestly, I'm trying to remember if I ever had to use that in any circumstance, and nothing's coming to mind right now. But it's out there. Certainly, maybe somebody on the community has had to deal with that. But anyways, no worries. Let's move on.
No, I didn't cover it, but I must admit that I'm on the same page like you, Chris. Didn't have to deal so much with that. I mean, I know it there, and I hope that in the moment where I have a customer in front of me who is wanting to have that feature integrated, I can speak with them and give him the feelings that I understand what he is referring to. But to be honest, I never had to deal with that. That's the short, honest answer.
No problem. There's a lot of, we have 7,000 features in UMS. I'm sure we've only touched on maybe 200.
Yeah, definitely. Just
Well,
a peak
guys,
of the iceberg.
I know what we're going to talk about may sound trivial to people, but the ability to enable a password protected via username, Active Directory username and password, screen lock, it's like a necessity every time you do a project that includes this. Seb, you want to talk through this part of the video that you created?
Yes, for sure. I would say it's, especially actually with the 11.06 version, one of the still main advantages of the Active Directory login on the endpoint. Let me just cover one thing which is only applicable on Citrix, if I remember right. We already have a feature which is called synchronized Citrix passwords. That means that even if you're not using the Active Directory login, and you just boot up into the desktop, you start your Citrix session, you're leaving your workspace for lunchtime, and you don't have a specific hotkey pre-configured by your IGEL pre-sales people, which lock the endpoint.
Well, hold on. That's assuming the user does that hotkey. So let's just assume they don't, because they don't.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So you leave your workspace, and obviously your session will be there until the Citrix timeout will hit. But that's sometimes pretty long, could be half an hour, sometimes it's not configured at all, or maybe removed for some reasons. And what we do there is we synchronize the Active Directory password that you entered in the Citrix Workspace app client with the local screen lock. So even if you're not using the Active Directory lock, you are still able to have the screensaver from IGEL starting and having your personal Active Directory password to unlock the screensaver.
So Seb, you're actually syncing that, or you're just calling on that?
No, it's there. It's definitely something, but it's not related to that topic directly, what we are looking at the moment, because it's not related to the Active Directory login process. Yeah. But I'm just telling you that there is this feature, this configuration on the Citrix storefront login, which you can activate even if you're not using the Active Directory login.
Okay.
We do more or less the same, like the Active Directory login, but without having that pre-authentication mechanism happening.
Okay, that's good to know. I've been in that situation before. I didn't know how to solve that, where you need to be able to lock the screen, but you don't want to give everybody, you don't want to use the same generic local password to unlock it.
Yeah.
So you're saying it syncs with the AD password. So I guess it can read your AD password and bring that down local? Or
yes, more or less. I mean, I will not go into the detail because it's a really complex process, but just in a few words, we modified a little bit the Citrix Workspace app login mechanism. And then we were able to use still encrypted and secured your password without having the need to re-enter it somewhere. And that is a mechanism that is doing the synchronized password lock. Like I said, it's only available on Citrix, but just in case on VMware Horizon, on IDP, it's not there.
Okay. So that's one way to get around the need of needing to lock the screen so people can't, sneaker net behind you, just browse up behind you when you're going to the bathroom or lunch or whatever. But a better, more holistic way of managing the experience is to have you use your Active Directory username and password and pass that through, and then use that to unlock the screen lock, which I think that's where we're going next.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I was thinking that's feature. I'm looking at it now. It's under Sessions, Citrix Global Storefront Login, Synchronized Citrix Password with Screen Lock. That would be something you would use if you have not already set up an AD auth into IGEL. So the typical boot up IGEL, you get to that IGEL desktop, and then you log into Citrix from there. But you want to put a screen lock on it. That's what it would be for. We should probably have a session on that at some point. So back to the scheduled program. Keep moving along here. Sorry.
No issue. Thank you very much for completing that. On the screen lock password in general, so coming to the Active Directory topic again, we have the ability to use that feature still that Chris just mentioned with the synchronized password, but in our case, we will just keep the standard way. So as soon as you start your screen lock, it will automatically use the Active Directory login mechanism. So as soon as, let's say, 5 minutes after leaving your workspace, your screensaver is starting, you will have to enter the Active Directory password that you are using for your user in the password field, and then you unlock your PC. But now let's imagine that you as an administrator needs an access to the desktop. So you have, let's say, some maintenance that you want to achieve, and you need an access to the endpoint. That's something that you can configure under a user interface screenlock. And there you have a specific option under options, which is called the screenlock password that you can create. And this password is obviously a password that is then deployed to all your endpoints, so be extremely careful with the kind of password you're using there. But it will give you, as an administrator, the ability to unlock the local IGEL operating platform to do something there. It's not mandatory to have it installed, but it's just sometimes the best practice. Yes?
Seb, you covered something briefly, which was, okay, when you set a screenlock policy, by default, if the user is logging in with Active Directory, they're going to be able to unlock that screenlock using that. And what you're talking about here is a workaround in case the administrator of the IGEL environment needs to walk up and unlock it because somebody's locked in and he needs to get in. This is that global, local, universal I don't want to call it a backdoor, but override.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Great.
That's more or less it on the screenlock password. Like I said, it's still one of the main feature of the Active Directory login that you want maybe to use if you are not on Citrix. Just mentioning. Well, the next topic that, if I'm looking at the list, is a local user for emergency. I must say that I had to retest it because I had a couple of issues in earlier versions on 10, I guess it was on 10.06, and then I never tried it again on 11.04, 11.05, and neither 11.06, which imagine the following. The device is booting up into the Active Directory login mask, and you have, 100 devices that you want to manage locally because you want to check some stuff locally. You would have to log in every time with Active Directory login, which is pretty easy if you are coming from the same company, if you're your own field service.
Hey, Seb, let me set this up for you real quick.
Yes.
Even in the world of Windows, right? It's good to use Active Directory Group Policy Manager to push out a local user with a local username and password that your whole team knows that you can systematically change and manage through Active Directory. But this is kind of the way the workstation admins always have a way to get into a system, even maybe if it's offline or something.
Yeah,
it's a good practice. Not often done, but a good practice.
Definitely, yes. So that's what we try to cover in that next section. Let's imagine the field service is not coming from a company, and you will not give some external workers some Active Directory login just to log into an endpoint. That's one approach. There are thousands maybe, but 10 other approaches where you will need a local user, but that's the first that came to my mind. And there, we have the ability to use a local user that you can configure in our profile. The standard configuration, and that's something that you might expect as soon as you see the login screen from IGEL, there is a small other users on the bottom left part of your screen. My expectation has been to click on that, enter the user, which is in case our local user on IGEL OS, and enter no password or maybe the password user, and I would be able to log in. It will not function. So you can't do that. That's the reason why we have a specific feature, which is again under security and again under logon and again in the same submenu like the Active Directory, which is called local user. And if you remember that we set a specific password just before in the screenlock feature, you can say, hey, give the local user the same password, like the screenlock password that you created just before in your profile. So as soon as you did that, just enable this local logon with screenlock password for the local user. You will be able to log in into the IGEL OS operating platform without having to enter an Active Directory log. That's great for emergency reasons, can be a great reason for update mechanism, but you have to do that locally, for your field service maybe, or for a local IT administrator directly on site.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, one of my first jobs in IT was I was running around updating a bunch of workstations one at a time. And I had a local user ID that I would use. And it took me years to realize how this systematically managed system had a local user ID that, was correct everywhere I went. At some point I worked with a really smart guy and I saw him do it and it all made sense. That's exactly what you're doing here.
That's one of the, let's say, 10 or 15 different approaches where this configuration makes sense.
But your advice is not to make that password like simple 1, 2, 3, right? You wanted to make it somewhat hard to guess and probably change it every so often.
Absolutely. And even if it's, let's say, not extremely dangerous to have that password leaked, I would even recommend to create a master profile for that. Master profiles, just as a short reminder, is the highest priority of profile that we have in the IGEL UMS, which cannot be overwritten by a standard profile and which cannot be edited by a non-administrator UMS user. Like I said, it's not mandatory, but my best practice would say, hey, as soon as it hits a password, remote access like the shadowing function, depending from the customer where we are speaking to, I'm recommending to use the master profile feature. But that's another topic. But absolutely, yes. It should be.
I would concur with that. Yeah, definitely. I would concur for sort of global settings. A master profile is a very nice feature, by the way. It is not on by default. You have to go into UMS and turn on that, as well as the template stuff that you could leverage. So one example for me with the master profile, I have a standard location where I point all my firmware updates to. So that always has that address set. It never changes. But then what does change, I have a template where I'm pointing at different versions of firmware. So I just, create a new value for that, and that plugs into that one little spot on the firmware update. So you could use master profiles for all kinds of things, but a password or a security baseline profile would probably be a great example of the use case there.
To 100%, yes, definitely. I love master profiles for that specific use case.
So Seb, I kind of moved forward a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And you're at the very end here, and you're actually showing in this video how to understand the legend of what it means for a machine to look a certain way in UMS. All this time I never realized this thing was even here, and I've always just kind of been guessing and too lazy to go look it up. And well, there it is. So the way just to look and see what the different colored screens and icons mean in UMS.
And that's just a small piece of information that we have in the IGEL UMS, but just in case I want to mention it, because besides the fact that a lot of people are not knowing the differences between the different icons, like the magenta color or the orange for the update, you still have the ability, without going to the kb.igel.com website, to open the legend locally in the UMS. Just a small feature that was introduced, I can't remember, in 509 or 601, I can't remember when. But if you go to Help and to Legend, in that menu, you will get a complete list of the icon and what they mean. And especially if we look at the feature we are talking today about the Active Directory login, you will see inside of the UMS, if your device is, let's say, in use by someone, that means that is not in the Active Directory login mask, or if it is in the Active Directory login mask, which would help you as an administrator to say, hey, I need to push an update in lunchtime. The user is not logged in on the endpoint. There is a high probability that he's not working at the moment. Come on, just hit update without having to interrupt the end user because he's not apparently working. And this small legend is really helping a lot of our customers to better understand the state of the endpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go check it out because it is, I think it wasn't really a large fanfare feature, I would say. But it is, when you see it and it's color coded, really nice. I mean, it really kind of helps you fully understand what do those icon colors actually mean. Case in point, I never saw the black one, right? The black one says the device has never been connected. How it got to that spot, I can't remember, but I've seen that before. And I'm trying.
Can you give an example if you like?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
The easiest way to reproduce that is you have an import via CSV file, or you create the endpoint by right-click devices, new endpoint. And as soon as you hit a new device, and as soon as you enter there the MAC address of the device that you might have 1 month joining your UMS, so without having the need to activate the enable automatic registration without MAC address import, the device will stay black until the moment where it first connects to your UMS.
So it's sort of like a pre-populating of devices,
Yes.
And then they come in, and then it can map up and obviously license them from there. Okay.
Exactly.
Guys, I'm
All
just
right.
gonna jump in here and talk about, IGEL, the company. The amount of stuff I learned on every one of these calls just kind of reinforces the idea that this is IGEL's business. This is what IGEL does. And when you try to compare it to another product out there that doesn't focus on nuance like this, it's not even close. It's just I'm 5 years into this IGEL experience of mine, and I'm still learning stuff, a ton of stuff all the time. I have a machine behind me here this morning that used to be IGEL. I had to convert it to something else for some testing, and I just don't get to play in the IGEL UMS world. My team now runs our UMS server. I would love to get in and play with this stuff more. It's just not my job anymore, but always impressed with how IGEL has features that I didn't know I needed, but it's in here, and there it is right in my face.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at some of these things, and especially as we were going through some of the AD local login kind of setup, and I'm like thinking to myself, did I run into a customer situation where I said no, and the answer was actually yes, because I just didn't know.
That's what I'm saying. I've had experiences in my past. Like, I don't think you can do that. And now I found out you can. I'm like, oh, I was an idiot.
That's right. Yeah. Well, if you're not sure, I guess the short answer is maybe. Let me check.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to get back to somebody.
For sure.
But
well, I think I don't know, and the next step is let me call Seb and find out, because
that's right. He's on LinkedIn. Let me hit him up.
He's the guy that seems to know all this stuff, know where it's buried. I mean, I've had great resources at IGEL, still do, but man, Seb just constantly shows me something new every one of these calls.
Happy to hear that.
Seb, you want to move to North Carolina? You can come hang out with us. I'll get you an office right here. Sit right here.
Hey, I already give you one arm with LinkedIn. Don't ask for the second arm. There's something which might happen for the moment. I cannot promise that again.
The weather's nice here.
It's nice.
It's a great time of year.
I believe that.
So I won't ask again for another week.
That's right.
Perfect.
Doug Brown's going to show up on this podcast. Stop trying to take my guy.
Well, I didn't say take him. I just said have him come sit here.
That's right. It's a relocation, right? He works for IGEL. He just happens to be in North Carolina now.
Exactly.
So.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the time today. I've got to move on to my other job,
sure.
Which is I got to go meet with the bank and find out how I'm going to fund more money for my ServiceNow practice. So I go from being kind of the interviewer of awesome technical resources like you guys to begging the bank to give me some more money.
Well, do your thing, man. Do your thing. And look forward to another one of these in a couple of weeks. I think we added a couple more topics we could probably deeply dive into for next time or future ones. So,
and if you're out there listening, look for an IGEL Disrupt somewhere near you.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. First one is Frankfurt in 2 days. I will be there.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Seb.
Thanks again. Have a good week.